Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Paul Harrison. I'm a professor in the Religious Studies Department where I teach Buddhism, and I'm also one of the co-directors of the Ho Center for Buddhist Studies. And it's on behalf of the Ho Center that I have the pleasure of welcoming you here tonight to this event in the TT and WF Chao Distinguished Buddhist Practitioner Series. I also greet you on behalf of our co-sponsor, Stanford's Continuing Studies Program. And it is my great pleasure and honour to introduce to you tonight Dr. Jack Kornfield. But before I do so, might I remember to ask you to turn your cell phones off if you haven't already done so. Jack Kornfield trained as a Buddhist monk in the monasteries of Thailand, India and Burma after a stint in the Peace Corps in Thailand following his graduation from Dartmouth College in 1967. Having studied under the renowned Thai Buddhist master, the Venerable Ajahn Chah, and the Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw of Burma, another equally renowned meditation master, he returned to the United States to embark on what has become his life's work, teaching insight meditation and making the Buddha Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, accessible to Westerners. In 1975, he co-founded the Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Massachusetts, with Sharon Salzberg and Joseph Goldstein. And then in 1987, he set up Spirit Rock Meditation Center in Woodacre, here in California, which is his current base of operations. But in fact, his teaching has taken him all over the world. Jack holds a PhD in clinical psychology and has written over a dozen books, including Seeking the Heart of Wisdom, Living Dharma, A Path with Heart, and my favourite title, After the Ecstasy, The Laundry, and his most recent book, Bringing Home the Dharma, Awakening Right Where You Are. Many of these books are probably on your bookshelves as they are on mine. Translated into 20 languages, they are read the world over, so it is no exaggeration to say that Jack Kornfield has become one of the key figures in the development and spread of Buddhism in the modern age. It is thus a very great privilege to have him here tonight in person to address us on the subject of mindfulness, love, and graceful living in fast times. Please welcome Dr. Jack Kornfield.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thanks to the Ho Foundation and thanks to Stanford University for hosting this. How is this sound? I'm talking kind of soft because I'm actually a little bit sick and my throat isn't that great, but hopefully you can hear me anyway. If I talk softly, you'll just have to listen very carefully. So, Buddhist teachings at their heart are a science of mind. Buddhism also functions as a great world religion with its practices of devotion and its whole cosmology. But if you look to the original teachings of the Buddha, Buddha meaning the one who awakened or the awakened one, those simple original teachings are primarily a description of human happiness and human suffering and how we can live in a wise and a gracious way in this mysterious human life. You could call it, as people have, the art of living, and at its essence it is born or supported by the practices of mindfulness and compassion. The art of living being neither a careless drifting on one hand, nor a fearful contraction and clinging on the other, but rather being sensitive to the day, to the moment, to the reality of where we are in a new and open way with mindfulness, with what Zen Master Suzuki Roshi called beginner's mind. So tonight I'll speak both universally about Buddhist teachings and perhaps a little bit personally as well. Before I do, though, it would be helpful to know a little about you, to whom I'm talking. How many of you are students here? A small handful. Where are they? They're off, it's Friday night. Where are they? Come on, dude. It's party night. All right. How many of you are educators? Oh, thank you. Bow to you. How many are in the healing professions? Thank you. Scientists? Great. Artists? Business people? Fabulous. Conscious business people, of course. Parents? Half the group, this is wonderful. How many of you have an established meditation practice? Probably about half. How many are relatively new to meditation? Virgins, even at Stanford, imagine. Okay, that's good. All right, now I want to try something that I've never done before. I'm going to ask you to do me a favor when I ask the next 4 or 5 questions, and that is to close your eyes, because I want to be able to have people raise their hands without other people looking, just to see. How many of you carry a lot of concern for the state of the world? It's a lot of hands. All right. How many of you, let's see, how many of you are concerned about the environment? Okay. How many of you have come from difficult family backgrounds? That's about half. The other half have forgotten. How many of you have, either personally or in the relations and those close to you, have experienced the suffering of addictions? Maybe a quarter, okay? How many are dealing with significant health issues? Okay, 10%. How many have in your family history or your own community, people very close to you, issues around mental health or suicide, things like that? Maybe a third of the hands go up. How many of you consider yourself activists? Another third, by whatever means you have. All right, this is enough. And the reason I did this, beside that it helps me to get to know you a little bit, is that we take our seat here, as the Buddha did under his tree of enlightenment, in the midst of our own humanity, in the midst of what's called the 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows in the Tao of human incarnation, that has immense beauty and creativity, and the flowering of all kinds of human capacities and earthly glory, and also the ocean of tears. And if we don't open ourselves to look at what it means to be a human being and where we've been born, then the possibility of living wisely really isn't available to us. This from the front page of a section of the Wall Street Journal last year, entitled "So Young and So Many Pills." It describes the number of prescription medications given to children and teens in the country: ADHD, antidepressants, antihypertensive, antipsychotics, other things, and it's in the tens of millions. So here we are. Here we are, 2014. And I began my study and practice in Buddhism. I was an undergraduate at Dartmouth doing pre-med, and I went from an organic chemistry class, which was interesting, and met Dr. Wing-Sit Chan, who was a visiting professor from Harvard of Asian Studies, and would occasionally sit cross-legged on the desk and talk about Lao Tzu and the Buddha and suffering and its causes and the release in the end of suffering and the joy that's possible in life. And I realized that I needed that. because my own family life, I had a scientist father who was brilliant in many ways, but also quite disturbed, violent, angry, a really, really difficult person. Our whole family life was tainted with a great deal of suffering. And I didn't know how to deal with my own inner life. I was insecure. Talk to a student here, you'd probably find that out to be pretty common. I wasn't terribly connected with my own body. I wasn't an athlete. There's that line from James Joyce where he writes, Mr. Duffy lived a short distance from his body, kind of the Western. And then I heard these teachings about what might bring inner happiness and what might bring well-being. And I thought, this is really what I need. And what I've seen in the half century since then is that our education system is only half an education. And to get a great Ivy League education in history and science and math and philosophy and technology, and not to have social and emotional learning, not to have somebody talk about how to deal with grief or forgiveness or one's own anger, or to find one's values, or how to listen to what really matters, or how to have a successful relationship with another human being, or how to just live wisely in this mystery of human life, is like giving an education without putting a rudder on the boat. Story. An army lieutenant, angry, often bad temper, flew off the handle, young guy, was remanded by his superior officer to take an 8-week mindfulness training course. They have it in the military now. I'm very glad, and I just hope it goes up the chain of command. But So he did, and about 6 weeks into it, he was in the supermarket on the way home. Late, or evening, crowded, long lines, and the woman in front of him was in the wrong line. She had only one item. She should be in the express line. And he and the army, which reinforced it, knew that people were supposed to do things in the right way. He got irritated. And then she was carrying a baby. She stopped at the checkout clerk, and they began to coo over the baby, the way people do. He got more irritated, and then she handed the baby to the clerk, and he got really angry. There's a long line, the nerve of her. But then he realized, because he'd been practicing, he could feel the wave of anger, and with it a kind of fire or pain in his body. He realized it wasn't going to help anything, so he did his breathing and his mindfulness practice, kind of softened, and he's always kind of a cute little boy anyway. So he got up to the checkout clerk, his time, and he said, that was kind of a cute little kid that you were holding back there. And she said, oh, did you like him? He's my boy. You see, my husband was killed in Iraq last year in the military, so now I have to work full time, and my mom takes care of him, and she just tries to bring him in once a day so I can see him. We're so quick to make judgments of another, or to make judgments of ourselves in unhealthy ways. They wouldn't hire you to be a judge in a civilized country, probably. You'd have to go find Idi Amin or something, and you'd say, oh yeah, put him on the bench, right? We're so quick to judge another. And what mindfulness and compassion taught this soldier, even in 6 simple weeks, was how to feel the feelings and see the reactivity that's natural to us in the way we've been conditioned, and to realize that there was another way of being, and that he could acknowledge that with an awareness that gave him a different sense of freedom and also a different sense of human connection. And so this is the gift. And yes, there have been 3,000 studies in mindfulness and papers written in the last 2 or 3 decades that show increased emotional regulation and greater physical healing and the steadying of attention that's possible, from Elizabeth Blackburn's work and the UCLA studies on affect regulation, all these things that show the benefits of this. But most importantly, it's how do we live? How do we treat ourselves and one another? And what brings us happiness? Now, the important thing to say about Buddhist practice is that it's not meant to be a grim duty. You know, you go to the gym, you work out, you diet, you get some therapy, you know, you do all this stuff as self-improvement. It's fine, helps a little bit, you know. But it's not about that. It's not about improving yourself, really. It's about stepping out of the history or conditioning that you might carry and realizing that there's a fundamental freedom to the human heart that can be experienced through your presence with mindfulness and compassion and attention. And I've seen it in teaching over years. People tend to be at times kind of loyal to their suffering. Do you know what I mean? Where we have a certain history or background or something, and we think that it defines us. My good friend and colleague for years, Ram Dass, who some of you may know, who wrote Be Here Now back in the 60s and so forth, when he came back from India as a spiritual teacher after having been a professor at Stanford and Harvard and dropping out along with the LSD crowd, when he came back with a beard and beads and spiritual teaching from India, somebody raised their hand and said, wait a second, Ram Dass, weren't you born Jewish? You know, why are you doing this Hindu thing? Don't you respect Judaism? And he said, oh, I do. He said, I love the Hasids. They're, you know, the Hasidic masters are like Zen masters, and the Kabbalah has all this great mystical teachings. It's really beautiful. He said, I respect it. He was bar mitzvahed as I was, you know. It's a beautiful tradition. Then he paused and he says, but remember, I'm only Jewish on my parents' side. And he was pretty witty, along with kind of profundity, but it says something meaningful, that who you are isn't defined by your history. And when Nelson Mandela walks out of 27 years in Robben Island prison with such magnanimity and graciousness of spirit, that he not only changes South Africa, but really changes the imagination of the world, they can put your body in prison, but no one can imprison your spirit. And this is really the heart of the teachings of the Buddha, passed on from warm hand to warm hand, from generation to generation, that you too can be free. And that in being free, you can also engage in the world with a great heart of compassion or love. So that's the fundamental teaching, that happiness is possible. Passage from the Buddhist text, Dhammapada. Live in joy, in love, even among those who hate. Live in joy, in health, even among the afflicted. Live in joy, in peace, even among the troubled. Look within, be still, free from fears and attachments, find the sweet joy of living in the way. So it's an invitation for a kind of profound happiness that you see. I think people go to see the Dalai Lama by the tens of thousands, not just for the cool Tibetan teachings, which half the people don't even understand, including me at certain times. What is he talking about anyway? He gave this great teachings on Madhyamaka at Harvard Divinity School. I think there was a little bit of, I'm at Harvard and I'm going to show these guys what real philosophy's like, you know, or something like that from the Geshe. I think 2 people in the room understood it. It was a 3-hour lecture. But then he said at the end, if you didn't understand, don't worry. Only thing matters, compassion. Compassion. Everyone sighed with relief. But I think people go to see the Dalai Lama, not so much for the teachings, which are profound and wonderful. They go to hear him laugh. They go to hear somebody who carries as much weight as anyone in the world of the destruction of Tibetan culture and so forth, who can still and feel and weep as he does for the difficulties of the world, and then break out in this wonderful giggle and this deep belly laugh, and show, as he said, so much has been taken from us Tibetans. Temples have been burned, texts have been stolen our religion and our culture, taken in many ways. Why should I let them take my happiness? So then how does Buddha, as a teacher, as a progenitor of the science of mind, suggest that we find happiness? There's a series of different things that I'll speak of. The first is an expression of love or compassion, which is to say, in the really simplest language, don't harm yourself and don't harm others if you want to be happy. Kind of the colloquial way to say it, it's hard to meditate after a day of killing and stealing. It doesn't work very well. It's hard to actually be with yourself. So the ground of happiness is not to kill or not to steal or not to speak falsely and so forth. I have a poem by Lloyd Reynolds, America's greatest calligrapher, who was also Steve Jobs' mentor. It says, "A bug crawls over the paper, leave him be, we need all the readers we can get." So there's just this sensitivity and valuing of life that makes you happy and turns out other beings appreciate it as well. Or not to take which doesn't belong to you, not to harm yourself or others is the ground. And if a spiritual life or our human life doesn't have this sila, this level of care or compassion, it doesn't get you very far, no matter what extraordinary states you have. And this is really based on the fact that we are interdependent. This is a fundamental teaching from the Buddha, but in fact, you know it. As Alice Walker writes, one day, when I was sitting there like a motherless child, which I was, it came to me, that feeling of being a part of everything, and I knew if I cut a tree, my arm would bleed. And I laughed, and I cried, I run all around the house. In fact, when it happened, you just can't miss it. And you do know it. You know it when you walk in the mountains or listen to a magnificent piece of music or make love or take some sacred medicine or sit at the bedside of someone who's being born, which happened to you, or someone who's dying, that mysterious moment when spirit leaves the body, which will also happen to you. I mean, that's why it's so mysterious. And all of a sudden you realize here we are in this mystery. And what matters really? What matters in its deepest value is, can we love well? There's a beautiful passage that I have in this book from George Wald, the Nobel Prize winner at Harvard, because there was a public debate about whether there should be sperm banks and egg banks for Nobel Prize winners, so you could get really good sperm or eggs. And of course, he's very witty and smart. And he said, this is such a terrible idea, he wrote. And if you don't understand this, he said, you haven't been to your bank lately. Banks and love are not really compatible. And suppose you got a superior egg from some Nobel Prize winning woman, what would you do with it? You'd fertilize it, bring it to your wife and say, here, dear, would you take care of this for me? You see, it just won't work, he goes on. The truth is what one really needs is not Nobel laureates, but love. How do you think one gets to be a Nobel laureate? Wanting love, that's how. Wanting it so bad one works all the time and ends up a Nobel laureate. It's a consolation prize. So he goes on. It's really a kind of wonderful and amazing passage. But the truth is that this is innate in us. And it can be cultivated. If we have time tonight, we might do a little loving kindness practice. But if we don't have time for it, I commend it to you. It's in my books and those of Stephen Levine and John Kabat-Zinn and Sharon Salzberg and a lot of the Pema Chodron modern Buddhist teachers. Because it can be trained. It can be reminded. It's natural to you. Kids know it. Yes, they hit each other with blocks. We know this too. But then they can be trained. Use your words, right? I wish we could do that for world leaders, but that's a whole other story. But there is a sympathetic resonance that's built into your heart, where you see somebody fall, where you see somebody in trouble, and you almost can't stop yourself from wanting to assist them. Children know it and feel it. I watch it all the time. So this is not something alien to us. It gets lost in our culture at times. And what meditation and Buddhist practice does is it starts with the ground of don't harm yourself, don't harm another, and let yourself listen to this resonance of compassion and love and nourish it and act on it. But to do so, you need the next step, which is the quality of mindfulness, presence. And mindfulness, whether it's leadership, here we are at Stanford Business School at the moment, where I have also lectured with the whole business school present, looking for the same questions really. We know how to do business. How do we live our lives wisely? And when I got the call to come and work with the student body, they said, these are really accomplished students. They work hard, all the things and visions that they carry, but by the time they get done, they kind of lose touch with themselves because it's so intense and the future is so compelling, and they lose themselves. So I said to this assistant dean professor I was talking about, so what you want me to come down and do, if I understand, is something like soul retrieval? I said, yeah, maybe something like that, You understand what I'm saying, that these are both parts of what makes a wise human being. So, presence, mindfulness is neither resisting nor grasping. It is a clarity, a graciousness, a focus, a respect that allows us to see what's so without reacting to it. And then we can act, then we can choose and act in the world. But the first step is a kind of balanced awareness of what is. I'd like to call it loving awareness, because the two need to be wed together. Turns out mindfulness without love can become judgmental secretly or dry. And so, along with the foundation of compassion or non-harming, what's necessary is the deepening capacity to be present. A friend of mine has a sign in his therapy office, a psychiatrist, that he got from a casino in Las Vegas, and it says, "You must be present to win," right? Therapy, meditation, whatever. My mom died not many weeks ago. She was 91. She was ready. She'd lost some of her memory. She was getting weaker. And she was a really good-hearted person. So she was loving to people to the end and surrounded by my brothers and other family members, surrounded by a lot of love. But when you sit with somebody, especially somebody you care about, my own mom, and the gates between the worlds open, which is what happens at that mysterious time of death, it also at least made me reflect, well, how am I living? I mean, what questions really matter when you come through the arc of a human incarnation? And there aren't very many. Did I love well? Did I live fully? Did I give myself to life? No matter what hands you were dealt, did you make something beautiful of it? And so to become present really is a skill I'm calling loving awareness that allows you to be here whether you're writing computer code or speaking to a person who's in your family or making a painting or a business plan. It allows you to be present with clarity and also somehow in an integrated way, your vision and your mind and your heart and your body somehow all present together. The CEO of one of the top 5 companies in America came on a 10-day retreat to Spirit Rock. He's become a good friend. And in the last little meeting we had about the retreat together, he said, "I should have dressed better." I said, "That's a really funny comment to hear from someone." He said, well, when you're meeting yourself for the first time, you want to look good. So what mindfulness is the skill to be present for, in the Buddhist teachings, the foundations of mindfulness, of body, feelings, mind, and our relations with one another. And the text begins, my friends, there is a most wonderful way for living beings to realize purification, overcome difficulty, experience compassion, and attain the fruition of liberation of your own heart and mind in this world. And that is the cultivation or the development or the establishment of mindfulness, of body, of feelings, of mind, of this human life. The word mindfulness also, if you read in great Zen Master Dogen, he says to be enlightened is to become intimate, or to become intimate with all things. So mindfulness also has a quality of intimacy to it, in that it allows us to be present for the experience of our life directly as it is. It means in the body that as you sit to meditate, you begin to notice what's happening in the body. With feelings, you begin to notice what's there in the heart. Actually, enough words. Why don't we do it, all right? And then we'll talk a little bit more. So we'll do a little bit of practice, 3, 4, 5 minutes, and then I'll talk some more about it. Let your eyes close gently and sense yourself seated here in this human form, halfway between heaven and earth, under your own tree of enlightenment. You bring your attention to this mysterious human life. And the invitation first is to sense your body seated here. And notice the state of your body. Notice the fact that it's breathing. Feel it as coolness in the nostrils, swirling, tingling, back of the throat, rise and fall of chest or belly. You interbreathe with the winds that come across and dust the top of Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa across the Pacific, that carry the flavor of palm trees and the sense of the Chinese mainland, for better and for worse, the pollution and the great forests, and dust the tops of the Himalayas. You interbreathe with the world, feel it. And relax with each breath. Let mindfulness of the breathing help to calm and quiet, steady the body and mind. And notice too that around the breath there rise and fall a stream of thoughts. Let them rise and fall like waves of the ocean. Sounds come and go. And the breath breathes itself in the middle. Notice too, as you feel the breath and sense this body, notice the state of your heart. Excited, sleepy, bored, sad. angry, grieving, tender. And notice this breath and body, the state of the heart, with loving awareness. Nothing to fix or change. Rest in the awareness itself. So this is a simple beginning. Many of you have a mindfulness or meditative practice, but it's really this simple, the establishment of presence, of loving awareness. First with the body. Eduardo Galeano writes, the church says the body is a sin. Science says the body is a machine. The marketplace says the body is good business. The body says, I am a fiesta. So the start of mindfulness is to feel the breath and the body itself, and to feel the pains and learn how you can hold the pains of your body so they unravel and release. And healing takes place simply through that kind attention that you bring to. Because otherwise we're afraid of the pains and cling to the pleasure. We can't really inhabit our body. Mindfulness teaches you to listen to your body in a wise way. It teaches us to listen to our feelings. I have a list of 500 emotions. Affectionate, ambitious, aggressive, anguished, ambivalent, angry, amused, amorous, aversive, antagonistic, antsy, apathetic, apoplectic, anxious, appreciative, argumentative. Do you want me to go on to the B's? You know? We have a river of thoughts and feelings. Usually we're not aware of them, as Justice William O. Douglas said, at the Supreme Court level where I work. 90% of our decisions are made on an emotional basis. The other 10% is our justification of them. You know it's true, don't you? We live our life from feelings, but we're not always aware of them. To be wise, you become aware of body, you become aware of feelings. Otherwise, if you're lonely or bored or whatever you can't stand, you know what you do when you can't bear your own grief or your own loneliness? Open the refrigerator. Go online. You understand, because you can't be with yourself. So mindfulness extends the window of tolerance in neuroscience speak, to be able to be present for the full range of joy and sorrow, for the tending of this body, and then for the thoughts. My friend Annie Lamott, the humorist, she writes, my mind is like a bad neighborhood. I try not to go there alone, right? That's why we all came here together, right? So you see, the mind secretes thoughts the way the salivary gland secretes saliva. It just does. It's a river of thoughts. The Buddha called these rivers, the 5 rivers. Mindfulness is the gracious presence in the midst of it, where thoughts become, they're a great servant but a poor master, where thoughts become something that you can acknowledge and see, but not necessarily believe them all. If you believed and acted on all your thoughts, they would lock most of you up, myself included probably, you know. So to be able to see, oh, this is thought, this is healthy thought, this is unhealthy thought, this is feelings, you know, sad, grief. These are feelings to be acknowledged and understood rather than acted out. James Baldwin writes, I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hate and prejudice so stubbornly is they sense that once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with their own pain. And so the issues that we have of racism and wars and so forth, a lot of it is just projected, which is to say, we have the enemy du jour, the communists, the immigrants, the Muslim terrorists, whoever it happens to be, because we can't bear the fact that life is insecure, which it is, by the way, if you hadn't noticed. But if you can rest in what my teacher called the wisdom of insecurity or uncertainty, and rest in change, there you find composure, there you find liberation. So it's not only a personal task, but it turns out to be a political and a revolutionary task for civilization. We can all see that no amount of technology, computers, internet, nanotechnology, biotechnology, space technology, you name it, is going to stop continuing warfare, continuing racism, continuing environmental destruction. Those incredible outer developments need to be matched with an inner development of consciousness of humanity at this time more than ever. And this is what makes us a whole human being. Now, the beautiful thing about this is that it can be trained. All these studies show it, and thousands of years of people practicing. A man wrote to the IRS and said, I haven't been able to sleep because I failed to pay all of my taxes in 2011. So I've enclosed an anonymous cashier's check for $3,000. If I still can't sleep, I'll send the rest. That's pretty much a description of meditation, right? It's not that you sit down and you learn it. It's like learning piano or something. You practice it, and gradually the capacity to be present for your life and the people you're with and the things you care about with a balance and a gracious heart grows. And it cannot be idealistic, or you'll get about 2 days into it and quit. If you can sit quietly after difficult news, if in financial downturns you remain perfectly calm, if you can see your neighbors travel to fantastic places without a twinge of jealousy, if you can happily eat whatever's put on your plate, oh, hi, thanks for that, that's fine. You can make all the noise you like. We like you being here. It's good. Stay, please. If you can fall asleep after a day of running around without a drink or a pill, if you can always find contentment just where you are probably a dog. Right? I mean, in my trade, I get to hang out with swamis and lamas and mamas and papas and, all these great spiritual figures, and they're wonderful. They're great beings. They all have their troubles. They're all human, just like the rest of us. Mindfulness is this gracious and loving presence that said, yes, this too. Now, some other things that are important. See if I can do this in the next 15 or 20 minutes. Is that with the increasing speed and multitasking of our society, and we don't have many Stanford undergraduates here, but they, and actually it's the generation after them that are native, where you have these 2-year-olds who are, you give them a book, paper book, and they swipe the page to churn it. I'm serious. This is the majority of our kids. But as Albert Einstein reportedly said, and I quote this from no better source than Scientific American, anyone who can drive safely while kissing a pretty girl is simply not giving the kiss the attention it deserves. And a lot of the modern science research shows that multitasking, while we can get away with it, doesn't actually allow us to operate in a very effective or wise or complete manner with whatever task that we're doing. So you actually get to choose, or otherwise you get led. And the culture will lead you kind of through its advertising and its speed and also to a certain way of living. But you can take your own choice. You can take a break. You can take a walk. You can take 3 minutes to breathe and feel your body. You can do some meditation. You can do what my daughter and her friends do when they go out to a restaurant and they stack their mobile devices in the center of the table. And then the first person to remove their device has to pick up the tab. You can actually, these are your servants, but it will take the training of mindfulness to learn how to do this. A couple of other keys to say that are really important. One is intention, the setting of intention. If you read in Buddhist psychology and even try to understand the meaning of karma, in many ways the word karma means intention. I mean, karma, vipaka, cause and effect or cause and result, but the seed of it is intention. And so the masters, and I went to find what masters I could in Asia after Dartmouth because I knew I needed something to help me live more wisely and more fully and just to deal with my own suffering. Not to speak of the fact that the world seemed pretty crazy back then. That was the civil rights movement and the Vietnam War and things. It hasn't stopped being crazy, but it helps have a few people anyway chill out a little bit and center themselves. But anyway, you're greeted in the monastery with a bow, and they say, "O nobly born, O you who are the sons and daughters of the Buddhas, remember who you really are. Remember your original dignity, remember your original Buddha nature, your original nobility. Do not forget it." And here are the trainings to allow you to live this way, the trainings of virtue or compassion, the trainings of mindfulness, the trainings of intention, short-term intention. You're about to send a text to someone that you're in a conflict with, or you're about to send Facebook some pictures that you're not actually a little dubious about, or you're about to send an email, if some of you are old enough to still do that apparently. But it's in some difficulty, or you're in a conversation with someone and there's some conflict. If you take a breath and just stop and ask yourself, what's my best intention, or what's my highest intention, before you press the send button and reread the text or the email, or even listen to the tone of voice that's going to come out, which might be to defend yourself or get even or be right. Say, well, what's my best intention? It's actually to work it out, or to love this person, or to communicate with them, or somehow find our way. Your tone of voice will change. You'll change a few words in the email or the text very often, because the heart actually knows. And what mindfulness and loving kindness or compassion training offer is the window to listen, to speak to the heart and to listen to it. So short-term intention, or even for the day you wake up, what's my intention for this day? It's a reflection in the Buddhist temples, but one that's equally valuable in the temple of your own life. Then there's long-term intention. Traditionally, things like the Bodhisattva vow. The Dalai Lama wakes up in the morning and he says, may I be a bridge, a boat, a raft to cross, for those to cross the flood. May I be medicine for the sick. May I be food for the hungry. May I be a resting place for the weary. May I be a lamp for those in darkness. And may I do so until all time, as long as all time and space and galaxies exist, until all are awakened together. Some little vow like that, right? Bodhisattva vow, which is really the vow of living life based on the dedication to the well-being of all. It turns out that we each can set the compass of our heart and make our own inner vows. It doesn't have to be the formal Bodhisattva vow, but if we had, instead of our hour, if we had an hour and a half, I would actually take a few more minutes to unpack this and then have you sit and reflect. If you were this day in 2014 in glorious May, springtime, summer, to set the compass and make a vow, it could be as simple as I vow to be kind. I vow to speak truthfully and usefully to others. I vow to care for myself. Some of you really need to make that as a vow. Surely you do. This from Diane Ackerman, a great poet and friend. It's her version. In the name of daybreak and the eyelids of morning and the wayfaring moon and the night when it departs, I swear I will not dishonor my soul with hatred, but offer myself humbly as a guardian of nature, as a healer of misery, a messenger of wonder, and an architect of peace. So take a minute, 30 seconds, and just reflect. If somebody were to come to you, if the Dalai Lama were visiting and saying, hey, make a little vow for yourself, set an intention of how it is that you want to use this human incarnation. If you were to write down a line or two, what would it say? Just reflect for a minute. And if we had time, I'd suggest that you write it down and maybe turn to the person next to you and read it out loud, because then it would sink in a little more fully. Or put it on your dresser or your altar or wherever you put things like that. O nobly born, you who are the sons and daughters of the awakened ones, remember that you can craft this life and make something of it that's beautiful. And setting your intention and then returning to it and saying, what is my best intention, is a very powerful and fruitful practice. Now, mindfulness has to be paired with loving kindness. We had this famous conversation with a whole group of Buddhist teachers from around the world, including the Dalai Lama, about how much self-judgment and self-hatred students find when they come to meditation in the West. The poor Dalai Lama, who speaks good English, couldn't understand what we were talking about. Self-hatred. He talked to Thupten Jinpa's translator, back and forth in Tibetan. I know it. Finally, self-hatred, he sort of got it. And then he looked up and he said, but this is a mistake. That was his And then we talked about how important it is in developing compassion to include one person especially. You know who that is. As Miss Piggy would say, moi, The circle isn't complete without, is this compassionate for this one as well as those? That's really wisdom in some way. And I was just in Burma, where there's both a new flowering but a lot of trouble. And you may have read about even this handful of Buddhist monks going around encouraging violence. Just wrote an article about it called Buddhists Behaving Badly. Basically, it's like former Yugoslavia, where the military repression is lifted, and some of these monks are actually former Secret Service people who took robes to try and get people away from Aung San Suu Kyi and want the military back. It's very complicated. And if any of you have the notion to write to the U.S. Department of State saying, U.S. policy should really be to make sure the Burmese government know we care about this and that there not be ethnic violence in Burma and religious violence. Don't give them military weapons and carte blanche, because it could really cause a lot of suffering. But anyway, I was with Aung San Suu Kyi for a little bit. And whether it's her or various other people I know who've been in She was under house arrest for 17 years, and many of her closest friends were imprisoned and tortured and so forth. And she said, without my practice of mindfulness and compassion, I don't know how I would have survived. Mahatma Gandhi took 1 day a week in silence. He was busy bringing down the British Empire, and there were huge 100,000 person rallies and sometimes armed conflicts and so forth. And he'd say, I'm sorry, tomorrow's my day of silence. I'll talk to you in 2 days. It didn't matter. The king wants to speak to you. I'm sorry, he has to wait a couple of days. He wanted to quiet his mind and listen to his heart and try to sense from a place of stillness what was the wisest and most compassionate and also most effective action he could make. Because they say in Zen there are only two things. You sit and you sweep the garden, and it doesn't matter how big the garden is. That is, you find ways to quiet the mind and steady yourself and open the heart with the trainings of compassion and loving kindness and forgiveness, some of which I'll be teaching tomorrow in a little retreat here. You do those practices, and then you get up from your sitting, and the garden of the world offers itself, and you make a conscious business, or you raise beautiful children, or you right an injustice, or you feed the hungry, or you do all of the above. But you do it in a different way, because I've had so many activists come to practice with me over the years who are burned out from their rage and pain and suffering and all of the ways they get entangled, and saying, how can we tend this world and really make a difference? So Gary Snyder, I'm going to go over about 5 minutes, and you'll just have to put up with it. Gary Snyder, who is the great environmentalist, poet, Pulitzer Prize winner, Earth Household, one of his great books starting in the 60s, interviewed recently at age 84 by a friend of mine. With the global warming and all the environmental destruction, Gary, what advice do you have for us at this stage, seeing what's happened in these last 50 years? He said, don't feel guilty. He said, if you're going to save the world, save it because you love it. Don't save it out of guilt. Don't save it out of rage. Don't save it out of anger, because those are the destructive forces that are actually causing the fires on this earth. He said, if you're going to save it, there's only one force that's really going to make a difference. It's what lets mothers lift cars off of babies. It's the only force that's a match to the violence and the unconsciousness of the world. So if you're going to save the world, do it out of love. And you can't say, well, I don't have time to love. I'm sorry. The point isn't to perfect yourself. You've worked on that for a while, and it's a so-so project, right? The point is to perfect your love, really. Whether it's in your relationship or in your garden or in the work or the care that you do. And you can do that anywhere. It's a wedding of presence, of mindfulness. So as Thich Nhat Hanh says, you can wash the dishes to get them done, on to the next thing while you're thinking about a million things, or you can feel the soapy water on your hands. And the miracle of the fact that we have water, and there's 2 billion people on the planet who don't even have fresh water to drink or wash in. And bow to the water as it touches your hand in gratitude. You can walk and kind of think about other things, that's okay. But you can also remember to look around and see the lavender of the jacaranda trees and, smell the eucalyptus and feel the fact that your time on earth isn't so long, really, and treasure it in some way. And I don't mean get rigid about it. My friend, Zen Master Seung-San Sansanim, De Sansanim, who used to teach Zen, when you sit, just sit, and when you walk, just walk, was sitting in his morning breakfast table surrounded by Zen students, eating his breakfast and reading the paper. And a brash American student, which is most of us, went up to him, somewhat disgruntled or disappointed, and said, listen, you said when we sit, just sit. When you walk, just walk. When you eat, just eat. Here you are eating and reading. What kind of an example is that? He looked up and he said, when you eat and read, just eat and read. So the point isn't to add some new odious practice. The point is not to become a Buddhist, but to become a Buddha. And there are all these beautiful places around. There's Insight Meditation Mid-Peninsula of Gil Fronsdal's in Redwood City, which is a fabulous center to practice. You can go online at dharmaseed.org. There's 1,000 talks of mine and colleagues and teachings all for free. Or there's all kinds of other apps. Get some headspace from this former monk Andy Puttycombe. There is a Spirit Rock Meditation Center in Marin, where I am. There's Search Inside Yourself that started at Google. There's all kinds of ways and things that are available to you. And it's both to tend your own heart, your own life, and also to offer to use these trainings and practices to quiet your mind, to converse with your own body and heart, and live the being, the beautiful being that you are. Let's see. There's a story I want to read, if I can find it here. Just because of where we're sitting. One day, this is from Fran Peavy, who is a famous anti-nuclear activist and also worked on cleaning up the river Ganges with the founder of that project in Varanasi from her wheelchair. She would fly to India. Getting around India in a wheelchair isn't that easy. An amazing woman. Anyway, she died a few years ago. She wrote this. One day I was walking through the Stanford University campus with a friend when I saw a crowd of people with cameras and video equipment on a little hillside. They were clustered around a pair of chimpanzees, a male running loose and a female on a light chain about 25 feet long. It turned out the male was from Marine World, Africa, and the female was being studied for something or other at Stanford, and who I thought were the spectators were actually scientists and publicity people hoping that they could get them to mate. The male was eager. You know how they can be. He grunted and grabbed the female's chain and tugged. She whimpered and backed away. He pulled again. She pulled back. Watching the chimps' faces, I began to feel sympathy for the female. Suddenly, the female chimp yanked her chain out of the male's grasp. To my amazement, she walked through the crowd straight over to me, took my hand. Then she led me across the circle to the only other two women in the crowd and joined hands with us. The four of us stood together in a circle. I remember the feeling of that rough palm against mine. The little chimp had recognized us and reached out across all the years of evolution to form her own women's support group. I think we come together tonight, and people come with all kinds of motivations, and having the hands go up of people who have histories of difficulty in your family or fears for the world or all the things that we share as humans, along with your great hopes and optimism, which I also share. We come together and maybe we honor the fact that not only are we here in this culture, in this time, but we also have the capacity to deepen our love, to deepen our presence for one another, to deepen our care for the world, and that these traditional and ancient trainings, now supported by so much science, are spreading throughout law, business, medicine, education, and the culture. And in whatever way you can carry them in your heart and embody them, it becomes a gift to the world. So I thank you. And I look forward to seeing some of you tomorrow for our retreat. And again, thanks very much to the faculty and to the Ho Foundation especially.
question time, but given the fact that Jack has been struggling with fever lately, I think you'll all agree that we have had already a rich banquet of thoughts and feelings, and once again I'd like to thank him for coming tonight and speaking to us.